one with 6 less grams of sugar.
Room for one more?
Okay. You all set?
See what.
Okay. Good afternoon, and welcome to the Town of Nantucket Finance Committee meeting for Thursday, January 8th, 2015. This meeting is now in session. I would like to introduce all the members of the committee for everyone out in the audience and at home. Starting on my left, or being right of your TV screens, Cliff Williams, Steve Morey, Christy Kickham, John Tiffany, Craig Sperry, David Worth, and Jim Kelly and Joe Grouse will not be attending today. So I'd like to move to public comment, and at this time I'd like to call on the chairman of the Board of Selectmen, Mr. Atherton, to come up to a microphone. Anyone to share a comment from the meeting last night, which I did not attend, so I'm all ears.
Lucky you.
I'm all ears.
I'm totally disappointed when you don't come.
I've heard that before.
No, the Board of Selectmen last night on our agenda went over the budget, which you're going to see today, and we also went over the warrant and the articles in the warrant as they exist to this point. We got to, and we, as we go through these, any of the articles that is of interest or special attention, we often have a discussion about them. And one of the ones last night was the Community Preservation Act article concerning borrowing money. I think it's, I forget the number, what, 800,000?
800, that's correct, for bond.
And would commit future resources in the affordable housing section of the Community Preservation Act funds over 10 years or whatever period of time they propose to borrow it. I think we felt the discussion about that deserved special attention, and we voted as a board unanimously to make sure we communicated that concern to the Finance Committee and look for your support in giving that, as I say, some extra attention. One thought I had going back in time is to maybe get some of the original proposals on the project and how do those line up with what's happened over time. That's just one idea. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you'll come up with others. I think we're concerned about overburdening future commitments, perhaps inappropriately, and that's what you have to deal with. So,
well, thank you for sharing that. And while we're on the subject, the NPD&C also made a recommendation not favorably in this bond issue. So there are other groups speaking out, but we are also waiting for some fine tuning, for lack of a better term, from town council before we really delve into it. But so this all helps.
So we appreciate your looking at that.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you. Did you want to come? Oh, there's a question, Rick.
Was the concern about the concept of borrowing, or was it related to the housing?
It was more the, not so much the concept, because obviously last year we had another borrowing. I think it's a different situation. That borrowing is totally for a facility that's owned by the town, will be managed by the town. This is not the situation. This is a sort of a hybrid. It's what the Housing Assistance Corp of Hyannis, whatever the name is. So I think there's a different set of dynamics here. And, I would just advise all of us to remember what happened with the Human Services Center, for example. And that's one where we started with a certain amount of money, had a little bit more, and then it never quite got off the ground properly. I'm not sure that's the case here, but my own sense, without knowing all the facts, is a lot of the funding is coming from the Community Preservation Act resources. And I think the original funding probably anticipated financing from other sources as well. And once you have a situation where the town is in this situation where they are, we could end up being the funder every year. And I think you've got to deal with that up front and make sure we understand the program.
This committee's been down this road before with us, and we'll be down again. Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay. Moving along, approval of minutes. We have two meetings, December 15th and December 18th. We can take both together or one at a time. Does anybody have any questions or comments on December 15th? How about December 18th? Okay. Move approval for both?
Second.
Second, great. All right, thank you. Discussion on the minutes to approve, on the motion to approve the minutes for the 15th and 18th. Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Committee reports. I do not have anything myself. Anybody would like to, any committee reports from anyone? Very good. And moving right along, the next item is the Town Administration Board of Selectmen presentation or presenting an overview of the fiscal year 2016 general fund budget recommendations. And Libby, thank you for coming. I'll turn the floor over to you. I assume you'll take the lead.
Sure. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We've given this presentation to the Board of Selectmen on December 3rd. We also had a Board of Selectmen workshop meeting on December 10th. We went to the school committee meeting, I believe it was December 16th. And so we've started to, explain what we're trying to get at for fiscal 16. I'm going to have Brian take you through the revenue, but I also want to point out the other attachments that you have been given, just kind of briefly go over what they are. You've got the budget presentation, which looks like this and which is projected. You've got an executive summary. It's 4 or 5 pages, and it's got some attachments to it that include, I have a list of them here, our expense increase request list, and that looks something like this. And it lists by department all of the items that are new for the coming fiscal year that we're recommending. There are personnel items, expense items. There are some one-time items in there, and some of them would be funded from other funding sources besides the general fund. We also have, at the Selectmen's request, a health insurance expense history. We have a general fund subsidy history for Our Island Home and Solid Waste Enterprise Funds. And we have what we're calling a visitor services spending transparency document, or something along those lines, which is meant to outline the fact that the town spends as much and more as what it receives in the room occupancy tax on visitor services functions and activities. So we can go over that. We can go over any of the attachments if you wish, but our primary goal today is to go over with you our presentation. There are some things that have changed in this presentation, which we'll try to point out as we go. And there probably are a few things that are still going to change, which we'll point out as we go too. So Brian's going to take us through the revenue. Great.
And just to add that, all this is in our packet. It came under 3 different mailings, so I hope everyone sees that. Okay. And again, thank you for sending that all out. Brian, take it away. I'll be quiet.
Okay, thank you very much. So for fiscal year 16, we're projecting to be able to raise $82,434,776. And I'll go through the major categories, which are now on the screen. Through the normal property tax levy, which is statutorily allowed at 2.5%, we could raise $64,660,955. On top of that, we estimate new growth to be $700,000, which is a 40% increase over what we originally budgeted for fiscal 15, which was $500,000. Certified new growth for fiscal 15 was $1,037,000. So in consultation with the assessor and looking at some previous year history, we believe $700,000 is attainable and not overly optimistic at this point. Allowance for abatements are projected to be $1.443 million, which is a slight increase over what we had projected last year, and the reason for that increase is we are going through a triennial revaluation, which is a very in-depth revaluation by outside firms comparing property sales and so on and so forth. So we have looked at it, and typically it's always been 2% of the tax levy as well, so that's where that's.
Yeah, you're assuming then that there's going to be an increase in evaluation. That's about
correct. So debt exclusions, which are allowed to be raised over and above the property tax levy, are $6.808 million, which is a small increase over last year, which is due to the fact that we have, when we sell the bonds, we sell them at a premium to cover the issuance cost, and anything between the premium and the issuance cost on a debt exclusion has to be reserved on the balance sheet and then amortized over the life of the bond. And we are not allowed to re-raise that money again, so as that falls down, the debt exclusion number will start to climb slightly on a year-over-year basis. State aid we have projected at $2.342 million, which I know seems like a really large increase. But what happened last year was you had budgeted about approximately, I believe, $1.717 million, which was the number that originally had come out. The state did a continuing resolution, the House and the Senate, which was approved in the end of March, which would have not given you any time to have projected really to do anything with it. This $2.3 million is the exact number off this cherry sheet that the governor signed in July. It does tie to the continuing resolution that was passed in March. I'm comfortable keeping it level for 16, given all indications. We do not believe that state aid will be decreasing, and if the governor-elect, or governor now, his speech today was any indication, he's going to be working very hard to actually begin the process of increasing it back to 2009 levels, so I don't believe we'll see any cut there. Local revenue, which is essentially building permits, motor vehicle excise tax, local option taxes, rooms and meals, and other fees. Excuse me. We're projecting 8.4% increase over the fiscal 15 budget. We actually, once 14 was done and we were setting the tax, when we were working on the recap sheet to set the tax rate, we took a hard look at what we collected in 14 and made some adjustments to what we believe will happen to 15. So while this is an 8.04% increase over the budget from last year, it's actually only about a 5% increase over what we believe will collect for fiscal 15. The way that this typically works is that there's a lag, because in fiscal 15 you are allowed to basically look at what you collected in 13 as the benchmark, and you can't exceed what you collected. So when we did 15, we were looking at 13, and 14 came in better than what we had projected for there, and so those actuals could be used. So we increased 15 a little bit, and then have taken a small increase above that in expectation that certain areas will continue to rise. So overall, the total entire revenue is $82,434,776. As this indicates, this does not include the indirect cost calculations or any free cash usage. This is straight other revenue sources.
On the state aid, notwithstanding the $750 million budget shortfall, you are comfortable that 2.3 would fall?
Yes, I'm comfortable because both the Speaker of the House and the Senate have gone on record that they will not entertain any cuts to local aid, and that the reductions in the budget or the closure of the deficit will have to come from other sources. And Governor Baker has also indicated that he will not entertain any cuts to local aid as well. So I'm very confident that that number is where it will be.
Moving on to expense. This slide shows the general fund expense categories of over $1 million, what our current projection is, and what the percentage increase or decrease is. I won't go over each item, but that's what they look like. We have met with the school superintendent and haven't heard that they're unhappy in any way with their sort of allocation. So that does remain to be seen, but I think they're good with it.
Libby, you mentioned that remains to be seen. Are they pretty well?
Well, they're just in the process of developing their budget now.
Okay.
They're a few weeks away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't expect a change. I'm just saying, never say never.
Oh, okay.
General fund expense categories, over $1 million continued. These are health insurance. We've broken that out this year between active and retirees. That was a selectman's request, and helps show where the division is there. General insurance, debt service, retirement. We did get the retirement confirmation number at the end of last week, and that it was slightly less than what we had projected by about $75,000, so it's sort of immaterial.
Okay. Just on the health insurance, is the board contemplating any changes with it? I know that you're trying to, there was a push to go from the 90-10 to the PPO.
Well, we're always, so
Any updates
there's
on that?
two plans. The PPO is a 90-10 plan. The master medical plan is 80-20.
Okay.
And we're always trying to change it so that the town's contribution is a little bit less and the active employee is a little bit more. But those efforts at the collective bargaining table have not been fruitful
Okay, so that's-
to date. We're contemplating whether or not we should implement the Health Insurance Reform Act provisions which would allow us to make plan design changes, not contribution rate changes. That requires bargaining, but the plan design changes can be done under a different process, which requires some level of meeting with the unions and discussing the potential changes, but it's easier to implement those changes than it is the contribution rates.
And the idea would be to help reduce this number by doing that?
That's the idea. The
Okay.
plan design changes don't generate as much savings as a contribution rate change would.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Oh, yes, sir.
Libby, on the health insurance, there was some talk, I heard that the 12% increase, was that some of it was going to actually be higher. There were some figures that were...
We, at our December 3rd meeting, we had been coming out of a meeting with our health insurance consultant, and it looked as though there was, he might be recommending something higher, but it turned out in the end that we were looking at different numbers that we were basing the 12% on. So he was looking at one thing and we were looking at another thing. So once we met and figured it out, 12% will be sufficient. So we don't need to make a change there. But thank you for pointing it out, because that was a concern early in December.
Okay. All right.
These are the other expense categories. They're all listed here. You'll see we are proposing a 10% increase for the Health and Human Services allocations. I have passed that along to the chairman of the Contract Review Committee. All the rest of the items I think you're generally familiar with. OPEB, again, we're trying to make that a routine item.
And I guess on OPEB, was there any talk of even increasing that, considering the number?
We have not talked about that
Okay.
right now. We may in the future, but
We
we
might
wanted
too.
to just get it to be a routine thing
Okay. No,
first.
I thank you for doing that. I think that's great. Okay.
Did that money ever get put to work?
I think it's in the process. Isn't that in a fund trust? Isn't that in the
It's,
trust fund?
it is currently invested. We are also currently, I'm in the process of writing an RFP to put out not only that money, but all of our stabilization and other trust funds, and see who might be interested in managing it for us. But it is currently working, yes.
Yeah, that's great. Okay.
Town expense requests. These start out in a kind of an overview, and then there's detail in what was sent to you. We had $1.1 million of submitted requests. We're recommending $938,000. There are some one-time requests of $197,000, and then the rest are ongoing, either expenses or personnel. And these are recommended to be funded through the available tax levy and then some other funding sources as are shown there.
Okay. And I guess just one question on this is that I see that the town administration recommendation, has the board made a motion to adopt these yet?
Yes.
They have. So
Well,
board-
they basically endorsed what we were recommending
They did.
last night with a couple of changes, which
Okay.
I'll let you know.
Okay. All right. I should have went last night.
The next sheet is the funding sources for the expense increase request in a little bit more detail from the prior slide. We are intending to make a couple of revenue increases, but they are pending. A couple of them are pending a public hearing by the board. The wiring, plumbing, and building permit fees are scheduled for a public hearing on January 21st. Hopefully that's been advertised by now. Let me double check that. Anyway, that's where those items
Okay.
would be funded from. We wanted to detail what the, some of these other funding sources are, and they include the Cape and Islands License Plate Fund, the Beach Improvement Revolver, and the water company. That's a one-time item for the continuation and hopefully conclusion of the VoIP phone system.
And a question on the Cape and Islands License Plate Fund was the advent or the beginning of the Nantucket Fund. Will that affect this number? Or
Well,
will that next
I
one?
thought it might, and it may, but as our chairman pointed out at the meeting last night, it's possible that a lot of people who are seeking the Nantucket plate don't already have a Cape and Islands plate, possibly, so it wouldn't be taking away from the Cape and Islands plate.
Oh,
'cause
okay.
So hopefully a lot of people won't switch over from the Cape and Islands plate.
Right, that's the hope.
But I think we're going to have to just wait and see.
Okay.
We were a little more conservative this year, though, in what we're recommending be funded out of the Cape and Islands license plate, just to
Makes
be on the
sense.
safe side. The next couple of slides are mostly narrative types of things. This was meant to inform the board about how we're planning to meet goals and priorities in fiscal 16 with our budget recommendations. I won't go through them all, but they're listed here, and I think you all have probably heard about a number of them over the course of the past year or so.
Questions? Okay. Okay.
This is kind of a continuation of that, specifically with the expense increase requests. These are the areas that we'll be addressing. And then this slide is just to try to hopefully remind the board and the committee that we do continually look for actions and efforts to reduce expenses and or increase efficiencies and transparency, and those are some of the ways in which we do that.
And again, one question I've been meaning to ask for a while, is the hiring freeze over?
We no longer have a hiring freeze strictly in place. However, when any position becomes vacant, we do look at it as classification, whether it's needed. There is a review that goes on before we would fill it.
Okay.
So it's not necessarily a guarantee that it'll be filled.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, because sometimes, either due to technology or just due to circumstances, a certain job that's always been there may not necessarily be needed
Right.
anymore.
Right.
Because you're adding other jobs because you have new circumstances that you're trying to deal with as well.
Exactly.
So there's a negative side to that, and that's what you're trying to deal with here.
That's what we're trying to deal with here.
It
Not,
has nothing to do with freezes, really, in my mind.
yeah, it's just ongoing, continual
Yep,
review.
yep.
Okay.
List of outstanding and current unknowns. None of the citizen warrant article appropriations are funded in our budget plan. I will let you know that at one of your discussions about the citizen warrant articles, I think it was the town clerk's servers, that expense will be funded out of the IT budget, prior year article. That was only about $11,000.
We did take a motion not to adopt that article.
Yes, so
So
we're going
you're
to take
all
care
set.
of that internally.
Okay.
So we won't need the
Well,
article.
While we're on the subject, then, this committee did approve article for, I think, $45,000 for shelves.
Yes.
And the motion was out of free cash, which may have been premature, so that's
Well,
something we
we
may
have
have to
not
revisit.
factored that in here yet, and we'll get to
Okay.
free cash in a minute.
Okay.
'Cause there's some
Should we have
things
that
that have-
discussion now or later on that?
Well, let's wait to the next slide, because we're going to talk about free cash
Okay.
later.
Sorry.
We don't have our Chapter 90 number yet. We don't usually get that till early spring. The general fund subsidy to Our Island Home. We had a meeting yesterday with Our Island Home and went over the budget in preparation for the enterprise fund budgets being presented to the board on the 21st, and then following that, they'll be trickling through to you. I think we all know that the Island Home situation is difficult, and it is appearing that the Island Home is, well, not appearing, we know that the Island Home is relying more and more on its retained earnings to fund its operating budget, which really is not a fiscally prudent thing to do. So we have discussed the possibility, not for fiscal 16, but perhaps a future year, of the idea of an override for Our Island Home. Some people really don't even like to hear that, and others think it might be time for that. So there remains to be some discussion about it,
An operating override.
an operating override.
Okay. I think discussion that's worthy to have.
One of the issues is that there's this reimbursement amount, which you know about, called the CPE, which has been coming in regularly for the last, I think, 2 or 3 years, but following the fiscal year. So we aren't able to budget for it. We have been getting it, but whether or not that is going to be a routine reimbursement that we get annually is not definite at all. So we don't want to budget it. We don't want to rely on it. But that is the item that's kind of saving them right now,
Right.
because that goes into the retained earnings, and then we're using the retained earnings for the operating budget. Something that we did realize yesterday is during the capital program committee discussions, there are $677,000 worth of capital items for the island home, a new roof, a heating system, a vehicle, and a couple of other things. Those things are really not going to be able to be paid for out of the island home budget. We are going to have to fund those through the general fund. There is free cash to do that. The board endorsed the idea of funding them through free cash at their meeting last night. The only other alternative would be to use more retained earnings, which would wipe out the retained earnings, because there's only a couple $100,000 not being dedicated for fiscal 16 right now, would potentially be an override for that. And we don't want to go to town meeting for an override for those things, a capital or
And does that capital, wasn't there dedicated money for a study for New Island Home?
There's $1 million for design.
So that's different than...
And that will be borrowed.
Okay.
And the borrowing costs will come out of the island home budget. However, those costs aren't expected to hit their budget in any event until fiscal 17 at least.
Okay.
And on $1 million, at least it would be an amount that they can probably handle
Okay.
in the budget.
But that's a separate thing.
But that's
Great.
a little bit separate.
Okay.
State aid impact.
Libby?
Oh, sorry.
John?
You know, you had some detail here on what you were going to use on free cash. You had
Yep.
a free cash sort of reconciliation, I guess you'd call it. Was this included in what we've received, or?
We haven't entirely reconciled the specifics about free cash can I get to that in just a
Okay,
second?
that's the next slide.
It's sort of on the next slide.
Yeah. State aid.
State aid, as Brian talked about that, we'll have to see what happens, but we don't expect it to be a change, but we want to list it because you never know. NFD trailers, we mention this only because whether or not the fire station project is approved by the voters, it is entirely possible that we are going to need to utilize trailers at the fire department because of space issues. So we're putting that in there as an unknown right now. We didn't budget it because we were hoping that we could maybe hold it off until fiscal 17, and then maybe muddle along until hopefully if the appropriation is approved. But it's out there. The room occupancy tax and the transparency document, we reviewed that a little bit with the board. I don't know if the committee wants to review that more in depth. We have met with the Visitor Services Committee Chair, Mr. Chairman, you met with us,
That's
with
it.
him as well.
Thank you.
And that may be something to go over in more detail at another time.
Yep.
We,
I agree with
at our December 10th meeting, we reviewed with the board our 5-year operating budget forecast. We do need to do some more work on that, but it is in progress, and you all will see it as we move along. What we did so far, I don't know if we sent it to you or not, but it'll get posted online.
If we have. And just going back to the visitor services, is that there is a document in the packet seeing where the room tax is allocated, and I think I do want to commend Brian and Libby for putting this together. As you might recall, Article 34 at last year's town meeting was a non-binding question for that, and I think you guys did a great job in showing where the money goes. The visitor committee is, I think it's safe to say, there are 2 points which they don't agree upon, and they would like to give their position to us, which is fine. But my response is that the budget has been set, and we will listen, but we would not be taking, or I would not, and I don't think this committee would be willing to take any action. But I think that it's a good document to look over, because at some point the chairman, Mr. Reed, would like to give their take.
Be
John?
specific on that. You're saying that they want, they're going to be, that group is going to come before us at some point?
They want to. They've nothing is scheduled yet. They've approached me on more than one occasion to do that. So, and we'll see where it goes. I'll let you know, but that's just.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, also, just as a quick little side, and I hope this doesn't sound like I'm trying to make a power grab of any kind, but I want to re-review the Visitor Services Advisory Committee's charge, because that is a group appointed by the Board of Selectmen, and it would be atypical for a group appointed by the Board of Selectmen to go to another group to ask for more money, basically, without having gone through the selectmen first.
Okay.
So that's just something, it's just a protocol
That's
kind of an
fine.
issue.
From my standpoint, is that, as just trying to be consistent over the years, is that we're always willing to listen, but I'm very clear with them is that we're not going to change anything.
Yep, I just want
This
to
year.
be correct about
Okay.
the protocol.
We certainly don't want to step on anyone's toes, and we'll fully follow the process.
Thank you. Okay, preliminary free cash recommendations. This is going to need to be updated a little bit. Unpaid bills is in here right at the moment, and that $10,000 number is likely to increase a little bit based on what we've seen over the past couple of weeks. But it's also in the general fund budget, so it can go either way. The town and the school capital projects, this was already reviewed, the number of 1.7 has already been reviewed by Capital Program Committee and the board. What we haven't done yet is specifically apply that number to the individual projects. We also would propose 189 be used to fund one-time town expense increase requests. And whatever the remainder is, now I don't think this includes yet the Island Home item that I mentioned, 677,000.
Okay.
So that
All right.
needs to be worked in.
Looked into it, okay.
And then the remainder would go into either the stabilization funds.
Mhm.
Well, actually, I guess it would go into the stabilization fund or fall back to free cash
Right.
If it was unappropriated, yes.
if it was
If unappropriated.
unappropriated. The board has an article in the warrant to establish a capital project stabilization fund.
Okay.
But I think actually, if we're just doing that at town meeting, we wouldn't really put any money into it for fiscal 16, would we?
We could if it was approved.
If it's approved,
At town
right.
meeting, I believe we could still fund
Can
it.
will that be under the same rules as the stabilization fund?
It's basically the same rules
Okay.
as stabilization, 2/3 vote to appropriate.
Okay. Is everyone familiar with the stabilization
Yeah.
fund? Just to, okay. John?
Well, yeah, there's a couple of onerous, in my view, policies relative to the regular stabilization fund. And are those policies going, one of them, for instance, if you take out of it one year, you have to replace it the next year.
That's correct.
Yep.
Which makes it totally useless, in my view, because nothing
Well-
ever occurs in it.
Just the policies were made up by the board.
I understand
And so
that.
okay, so the board, I'm not sure either, which Mr. Atherton was here, but that's a discussion to have with them as we go down the line.
The point I would like to make is that when that's being considered, that they really look at those policies carefully.
Yep.
And I recommend strongly that they change some of them, one of them of which I just mentioned.
Yes, that is on our list of things to do. It's in our kind of queue, but we've had to focus on all these other things, so we
Sure.
haven't gotten back to that. But good point, well taken, to take a look at those.
Yeah, oh, Cliff,
Just to
yeah.
echo what John said, I thought when we make up a stabilization fund, we made up these rules. Did we, so you're saying we did make up the same criteria for the capitalization? Or we
Right
didn't?
now, it looks.
Well, no.
No.
I think what I'm just commenting on is the statutory requirements, nothing to do with anything local.
Okay.
Statutorily, it would take a 2/3 vote to make an appropriation from either fund.
Okay.
That's all I was commenting on.
Okay.
The other part is policy.
Right.
The other part is policy, and we would need a policy for the capital project stabilization fund.
Okay.
Next steps, the board had its public hearing last night. They basically adopted the general fund budget recommendations. There was one item that they removed, which was an expense increased item. Visitor Services had requested I think it was 2 or 3 information aids at the airports.
Oh, right.
And the board felt that those aren't needed, so those are out.
Okay.
Today, we're obviously reviewing the budget with you now. We're reviewing the enterprise budgets with the board on January 21st. And then, between now and then, you all will start meeting with departments. You have Plus right after this, and other departments next week. And then we'll get to enterprise funds and the school and the other appropriations. The next few slides are graphs and charts, and we realized today that we didn't actually update these from some of the numbers. So the numbers aren't entirely accurate, but they're not far off. They're pretty close. We also, at the board's request, developed a couple of more slides that they wanted to see, which Brian reviewed with them last night. One had to do with town compensation. We will get these out to you tomorrow. Go to the slide that, yes.
That one.
Is it that one?
Yep.
The board wanted to see a slide that was more representative of overall compensation, so salaries, retirement, and health insurance on one slide, and it looks a little bit like this slide, just format-wise, but, do you bring it?
Yeah.
It's going to look like this, and if you can sort of see it, it shows the blue is salaries, the red is health insurance, and the green is retirement. And then we have another slide that, or maybe it's this modified, that shows average compensation over a period of
That's it right
time.
there.
Yep.
Oh,
That's all in
sorry.
there, yeah.
Oh, it is all in
Yep.
there, sorry. It's so tiny.
Yeah, okay,
Much better.
So we'll send this out, and the
Okay,
board, I think, was pleased with that slide. The other slide had to do with building permit history. And what was pointed out at the meeting is, and Andrew and Linnell, if you guys agree or have anything to add, the building permit revenue has gone up, but a lot of that, it's not necessarily due to new homes. It's due to new permit fees that have come about for swimming pools and stuff like that, and improvements to dwellings and properties being made that require building permits and fees associated with them. So I think they just wanted to make the point that it's not necessarily, the building permit growth is not necessarily due to new dwellings. They're due to secondary dwellings, improvements, renovations, additions, things like that.
John?
Yeah,
So
that
we'll
was
get
good.
that slide to you as well.
That's a question I had, made a note of, is that it would be nice, I think, for us to see something that reflects what the mix is there.
Okay. Do you guys have something like that?
You know what I'm saying? In other words,
Yeah.
because when we're using it for pure budget reasons, it's fine the way it is. But
Yep.
when you want to think about other things, you really, what you just said was very important.
Yes, okay, well, good. I think Plus can provide that level of detail. I think that's pretty much it for an overview.
Okay.
Got a quick question overall.
Yes, John, go on ahead.
I think I know what the answer is, but I'd like to ask the question anyway. At this point, you have a difference between expenses and revenue?
We do.
We do.
And was that just for safety purposes? And what
Well-
would, if there ends up being a difference, what happens to the difference?
Brian?
The difference would essentially fall to unused levy capacity. So the difference would more than likely be, what would happen would, if we're allowed to raise 64,990, I think is the number off the top of my head, that difference would just not be raised in the tax rate, because we have other funding sources to go through it. So we're not going to spend all of it. So that's how it would be accounted for. So we would raise property taxes in the amount of 660, minus whatever the difference between what we could raise and what we actually authorize at town meeting are.
So that's it, okay.
And that's where it would fall to.
Gotcha.
Because there would be no expectation that any of the other revenue sources would have a material change, be it the debt exclusion number, the state aid, or the local revenue. No material changes to those, so the only place that it would fall to is would be the levy limit, and it would be what's known as unused levy capacity.
That's interesting, okay. So you literally we can't raise revenue that we don't need, that's what it says.
No, we can't.
Okay.
The state frowns upon that significantly.
Yeah, we could raise up to our levy limit.
We could raise up-
Apply it to any
It-
number of.
Yes.
Any number of things, right, yes, but you can't just raise it with no appropriation to spend it. No, you can, right.
It is my understanding it's been a while since we've raised up to the levy limit.
That's correct. The last couple of years,
Unused
we have,
capacity.
that is correct.
I don't know about a while, but at
Last
least
2-3 years, yeah.
Last two, yeah. Okay, that's,
So from a policy perspective, from the town and the selectmen, does it make sense to raise it to the levy limit and pay for some of these other expenses, either, putting more money towards OPEB?
the board did not indicate that they wanted to do that. There was acknowledgement that we weren't raising to the entire levy limit, and I think, well, I probably shouldn't speak for them, but they didn't raise any of that as an issue. And on our end, I think we're feeling as though we're accomplishing what we're hoping to accomplish, what we hope to accomplish can be done with the funding that we're putting forward here. And we don't want to over-expense things if we don't have to.
I mean, some of the, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, go ahead.
Some of the unused levy capacity is created in, or comes about from events that happen after town meeting, okay? When we send in the certification to the state for new growth, okay? If that 700,000 is, say, $1.4 million, it creates an automatic another $600,000 of unused levy capacity. So some of it comes about as a result of how the year that we're currently in ends up, is where some of the increase happens from. So could we conceivably spend, if the board and everybody was in agreement to spend right to what we project it to be? Sure, we potentially still could create it, but if we don't, and the reverse happens, then we have to have a meeting to cut back because we don't have the funding to cover everything. So I've never been a proponent in all of my time ever anywhere of going all the way to the levy limit, because I just think it's a risk that year may not pan out the way you want it to, the way you expect it to.
Greg?
Brian or Libby, are we significantly under that limit, or is it
Well, for fiscal 15, which the tax rate recap sheet was just certified, are you talking for 16 or for 15?
either or?
For 15, we were just over 3 million under it. And this year, right now, with this, we're projected to be about 500,000 under it, if everything remains the way we've projected it. So it's not millions, no. The majority of it.
Millions, we might be having a different discussion.
Yeah, if it was millions, we would certainly be having a different discussion, but the majority of that, like I said, comes about after when new growth is certified and our local estimated receipts come in. And some of it created last year, truthfully, was also the fact that, like I said in the revenue presentation, the continuing resolution wasn't done until after you would have had any ability to do anything, and that automatically created some unused capacity as well. So.
Even
go
even
ahead.
though it's only 500,000 or whatever it comes in, it's probably worth letting the taxpayers know that we're not spending as much money
Okay.
as we could.
Sure.
Because that's, it's not spending up to our limit is well hidden fact.
Yes,
Maybe you don't
yes.
want that.
Well, it's not that we're not trying to pull anything over on them. It's not that we don't want them, no. But
I'm not
sometimes,
suggesting that you are. I just,
sometimes people at town meeting whose citizen articles didn't get funded might
We hear it.
point to that as a funding source, which they certainly,
Yeah, a comment can be made. I know when you do your primer for town meeting, an overview, a comment might be made,
Yeah.
something along that,
yeah.
in a genteel way. without-
yeah. I mean, I fully understand how the town meeting would go. I'm just
Oh, yeah.
suggesting maybe there's some credit that
Well,
all of you who work hard to deliver a budget and stay within it. should
Yes,
That could
I
even, that could even
would
come from us.
appreciate
We could
that.
say that.
You could say that. That'd be great.
Yeah, actually, maybe we should do that. That's a good idea. We'll think about that. Anyway, yeah, I think that, I agree with you. I think some acknowledgement in some way should be, because it certainly shows fiscal restraint on your part, plus the flexibility that if things do change, that way you can react to it.
Exactly.
So it is nice.
Yeah.
Any further questions on that? Steve?
Actually, I had a question about the funding from the Cape and Islands License Plate Fund. I saw it in a couple places on the visitor services sheet and also on the funding sources for new expenses. What is the total that we get from the Cape and Islands License Plate Fund every year?
We get between 50 and 60,000, and we have a little bit of a buildup right now in fund balance in that fund. I don't have it with me, but it's probably $200,000 or so
Wow.
right now. The item that we're using it for, or proposing to use it for fiscal 16, is to fund our energy coordinator position in the event that we don't get, that position is funded right now mostly through a state grant. The benefits are funded through the town, well, actually through the license plate fund. And if we don't get that grant again, we would continue funding the position through the Cape Islands.
Great.
Okay. Good.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Oh, from the audience. Yes, sir. I think we're all done. Savarino, welcome back, by the way. We missed you. Could I ask you, since we're on the camera, would you mind coming up to a microphone, if you don't mind?
Oh, I don't want to break it. Sure.
Thanks.
I just have a quick question about energy. I didn't hear in the presentation that there's been any energy savings this year as a result of oil plumbing, and I didn't know if that might have, if if that was a factor that wasn't in this budget, that might show up later on, or are we lucky the contracts that can't take advantage of it?
The new barge hasn't arrived, so.
We haven't factored that in because I think we're unsure about what might happen. But we also haven't done very much of an increase, if any, for the fuel budgets.
Okay.
But you've locked in electricity on a long-term agreement.
We have electricity on a long-term agreement, and that will hopefully mitigate the National Grid rate increase. And maybe that would be offset by some of the reduced oil prices.
I was thinking gas is funded so much.
Yeah,
That would be a great savings.
yeah, it would. I just get, these things are so volatile.
Well, something to pay attention to. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, so I think we're all set. Thank you very much. We'll be following along on that. And this is the next item.
I'd just like to say,
Sure.
good job. It's cogent and it's easy to follow.
Thank you.
So thank
You
you.
know,
Striving.
Oh, wait a minute, John? Yeah, another one?
Thank you.
Yes,
I
sir.
would second that. This is probably the best I've seen.
Terry, please get that down.
Unaccustomed as I am to saying something like that.
Wow.
To go home, I guess.
All right, let's
This is
move.
probably the best
Did
I've
everybody
seen.
get that?
years.
Everybody heard that, right? The bar has been set.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Great
I
job.
might put that in my e-newsletter.
That goes up from inside.
All right, the next is a review of planning and land use services budget for fiscal year 2016. And I'd like to welcome the planning director, Mr. Vorse, and I'm going to say the financial guru of the department, Linnell Volans. If you want to come up, just would get to a microphone. That would be great. Well, make yourself welcome. And if you'd like to give an overview, we'd certainly appreciate it.
That's why it's sitting there. And there's the raised
Okay. And take it away.
Great, thank you. Thank you all. Thanks for having us. I guess you have this information in your packet. Do we want to just go through that quickly?
Sure, that's fine.
The slides. Basically, I think you all know about the PLUS Department Planning and Land Use Services. This is going into our third year of the combined departments. Our mission goals are pretty much the same as what you've seen. It's to basically move the development-related departments into one place to improve efficiency and operations. I've outlined some of our initiatives and accomplishments, which we've restructured the building permit intake based on a triage analysis of complexity to, again, improve efficiency. So you don't have sheds and COs stuck behind the Stop and Shop. Those are handled and out to people and dealt with more quickly. And so far, that's been working well. We continue to look at the HTC. We have a $30,000 grant. We have a vendor in mind to begin that process to look at building with Nantucket in mind. It's a publication, which is a great publication, but really seriously in need of update.
Okay, good.
To help them with their work. As you all know, because you've supported these warrant articles in the past, we've been able to start a major traffic improvement at Francis and Union Street, and that was a collaborative activity between the Land Bank, Affordable Housing, DPW. So everyone really got together, and hopefully we'll see some improvements at that intersection that will really help out this year.
And DPW is in the process of making their changes, whatever they're going to do.
The design, right,
Yeah.
and then
Okay.
Land Bank will follow with landscaping and
Great.
park installation at that location, which will be great.
That would be nice. Good.
And the house is coming together out at its location on, out off of Old South Road,
Okay.
on land that the town had given them in the past, which was Miller Lane, which you all may remember as well. So these things do eventually happen. I think last year we saw great success at town meeting with our warrant articles, which you're all involved in, so thank you again for your support on all that. And as Libby mentioned, we have a public hearing coming up for new updated fees in our building, wiring, and plumbing divisions. We have looked at to achieve some parity with other Cape towns, and I think that we'll see some dividends from that.
Andrew,
Yes, go ahead.
Sure.
on restructuring your permit intake and doing the triage and whatnot, do you guys have any measures from time of request comes in, permit request comes in, to when you target to have it reviewed and out? And have you been able to make?
We're starting to gather that data now. It's been, it hasn't been clear. The law requires basically a 30-day turnover once a complete application has come in. So we are starting to track that information. But it's not, it's, I guess it hasn't been properly tabulated in the past. But it's something
Based on when an application is considered complete is the issue that we're at now.
And I suspect you get a lot of incomplete applications.
Yep. And we're looking at a system.
But if you get a complete application, what do you generally, are you able to improve the review times? Do you have a goal to improve? I'm assuming you have a goal to improve the review times. And
Yes.
you statutorily have
The 30 days.
30 days, but
It has been beyond the 30 days, again, because the application procedure that has sort of come with the department is just to accept any application and not to really confirm that it's complete. Some of our new inspectors that we've hired that have come from other places have suggested ways to improve that, and it's something I see us implementing pretty soon.
Good. All right.
Yeah,
Oh, John?
Just, I was going to bring it up at some point, but I enjoyed reading through your goals and so forth. In my past, I've always tried to quantify my goals and my objectives, so that this speaks to what David just brought up. And so the question is, when somebody says, "I want to improve this," well, how do you know you've been successful if you don't have some type of a quantified measurement that you're going to have? And that includes a lot of other things too. You got about most of your goals could be quantified in some way, in my view. So, something to think about, anyway.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
And again, when you look at the priorities, it comes down to a lot of the things we just talked about too. We are looking at, we're having discussions now with town administration about restructuring health and HDC functions. We are, again, trying to improve and enhance the building permit application review time, and we will, I believe, have some better data for you next year, how that's working. I think our clerical group has been very successful in cross-training. There was a time that you would kind of come in and somebody would be on vacation and you couldn't get the answer. I think that group has made great strides towards everyone at least knowing where the information is. And I think we've gotten at least positive feedback from the users of that system. The enforcement measures is something that, again, we have some legislative barriers and other things that we're looking to basically amend to make that work better. We have expanded our enforcement group, so we've moved from a system where there's only one person doing enforcement to 5 are now entitled to do enforcement. So again, it would be a situation where maybe the local inspector happens to be on site, sees a violation, and can act on it as opposed to then going to a single person. And I think that's been better. I think, as has been touched on and as we've already talked about in the past, there's been increased building activity. We had a record number of permits issued in FY14, and we are at least on target to exceed that again this year, and that has created some needs for additional personnel. One of the additional personnel requested is another inspector for this coming year. And I think the chart, which you've all seen, kind of illustrates that pretty clearly. At-
John, is it okay? By the way, is it okay for questions as we go along?
Yeah, sure, that's fine.
John, go
Yeah,
ahead.
it's about that, I make an assumption that whether it's a permit, for instance, is a permit, depending, regardless of the size of the project.
That's right.
So that's a good way of measuring then your volume of work then.
Right. And as Libby mentioned, just to, to give you an idea, again, roughly, our low point in terms of new buildings, new single-family homes, basically that's between FY09 and FY12. That's 48 units in each of those years. Last year, FY14 is 127. That's still not, and I don't really see us getting to the peak, which was FY98 of 280 units. That's sort of a one-time thing. That was driven a lot by the building cap and, people trying to beat that. But what we are seeing is complicated renovations. I think you've seen them all around town. Buildings jacked up, twisted around. A lot of those kind of things, which don't count for new buildings, but nevertheless are major, major projects. So,
Does that drive more complicated inspection processes?
it does. It does. The codes are different. In some ways, new construction codes are pretty easy, clear. Renovations, once you start taking some walls out and see things that you didn't expect, especially with the older buildings downtown. So, yeah.
And do you discriminate, I don't mean in a negative way, in your permits, between new construction and renovation? Do the costs, you just articulated added costs for renovation.
Mm-hmm.
Do people proportionally pay more for their permits?
The fee schedule is based on a square footage affected. It's usually per square foot price. So if it's new construction, it would all be, if it's a gut renovation, all the square footage would be counted for. But if you're only renovating a certain portion of the house, that's what you would pay based on.
No, I'm following you,
Yeah.
but at the same time, if it's more expensive to do the inspection on a renovation, it would seem like the per square foot cost ought to be
And maybe
higher.
they'll take that into account.
And you probably depend upon somebody telling you what they think the per square foot cost is, right?
Well, yeah, and there's been some discussion on that because the plans come in and then you go out in the field and it isn't exactly what it said. So there were some talk from the inspectors on how to adjust for that.
Which we've been good at catching.
Yeah.
So
That's where
the inspectors-
enforcement portion comes in and changing it over to several people instead of one.
Okay.
Okay, so I guess, touch on basically the categories in the budget overview. So the first item, the payroll salary, the increase overall for salary is 2%, which is within, certainly, I guess, exactly meets town administration goals for salary. And this does include a new inspector. So it is offset by some retirements and other things. So some of the more senior inspectors retired, and we've hired new people at lower rates. The overtime, we have not had an overtime budget before, which was part of the reason we had to come to you for a transfer, so we are budgeting for that now. Overtime is something we need to account for. Medicare tax, of course, is beyond our control. Insurance has gone down, and that's, again, part of the larger system. Repair and maintenance has gone up, and that's mainly because of our copier leases, and it's a direct result of advanced activity. There's just a lot of paper, as you can imagine, going through with the applications and everything else. Professional services, the $12,000 increase is mainly through the health department had requested additional services, part of their TIC program and other things, so we've responded to their requests. Professional services for planning board and yard sale have sort of washed each other out here. The professional services for planning board was a change implemented by the prior finance director, and it's been corrected to what it should be. The yard sales is a balance that is, again, covered by the costs that are generated through the sale of real estate, and that program has been very successful, I think you all know. Supplies are down slightly. Again, there's some efficiencies by ordering, for the entire office, one set of stationery as opposed to all kinds of different things. Et cetera. Travel is up a little bit because our inspector is an off-island person. His total compensation is still below that of the senior inspector, so salary plus travel still results in a significant savings for the town, and he has been an excellent employee, I would say. We do have some additional travel in the building department as well. We have new inspectors that need to get certified and have some additional training. The major item in other is, of that $50,000, is $33,000 in advertising. We have statutory requirements to advertise, and as you know, that rate has gone up quite a bit, caused us to tighten our budget last year. And it's something that, when we have our zoning warrant articles, when we have special permits, we have to follow through with the advertising. Okay. We've upped some of the fees, at least in the zoning board, to cover some of this, and I see some of that being looked at in the future.
One question on that, I guess maybe is for you, Linnell. Did you ever think of just separating that out and having an own advertising? Because some of the other departments have an advertising budget instead of having an other.
Well, we do.
Okay.
In here in the detail, this is just kind of a summary.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Okay. This is, okay.
So, yeah, and I don't think I'll go through all of this other information. It's here if there's any questions. And thank you to both Linnell and Martin, have gone over these numbers a lot, and appreciate all their hard work.
Okay. Questions? Craig?
I had a question. Andrew, I know in the past there's been talk of the online permitting process. Is that still being considered? Is it?
It is. It's something that's been, there's a vendor that has been looking at that. They had hoped to go live with the Historic District Commission as one of the first ones. I don't believe that has all come together yet, so that hasn't really happened. I will tell you, our wiring inspector has sort of put together his own system to do the wiring inspections online, requests for inspections. So that is actually happening, and that's been great.
Good. Christy?
Those applying for permits and having inspectors come out, is there an idea that they know what they're supposed to be doing? And when they don't follow it, how does that affect the process, and how do you hold them accountable? Maybe is there any fines with maybe an inspector goes out and things aren't done?
Oh, yeah. We part of the fees that we're looking at is a reinspection fee. So if you're called out to do, I call and say I'm ready for you, and the inspector gets out there and the work isn't done, we haven't had a reinspection fee, and now there will be one in the future. So if you call the inspector and they're not ready, you'll be charged for that, because it's taking up their time, and yeah.
Steve?
Yeah. With the increase in the repair and maintenance line item, you mentioned that was in part for the increased cost of photocopies.
Right.
Are you, hopefully this is inclusive of that, but if not, have you considered replacing the large format copy machine that doesn't function very well? I hope that's the case.
That large format my friend from the repairman for that. They're really expensive.
Right. I mean, have we looked into leases? They just, you can only make, I'm sorry, this maybe is a personal issue, but
Sounds like.
they don't, I mean, you have to do it on the darkest setting. The modern ones do email, you don't have to pay for the paper and
Right,
toner
and that
and
one
things
is,
like that.
is really old.
Right. Anyway,
Quite
I'm
honestly,
sure it's very low
there
on your
hasn't-
priority list.
Yeah,
but-
and there hasn't been, that's really something that the public uses more than we do, actually. If we need something scanned or printed on large scale, we go to IT and they do it for us on their much nicer plotter. And, we keep it going because the public does use it. I don't know the value of replacing it with a very expensive piece of equipment at this point in time.
Sure. I would never recommend purchasing one. I know
Right,
they are very
yeah,
expensive, but I do
leasing,
know
we
that.
could look into leasing it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anyway,
Um,
something for another year, I suppose.
Okay. Oh, David?
Septic system inspections, do you have a dedicated person doing
Both
inspections?
Richard and Artel do this.
Yeah, Artel does them,
He's
Majority
most,
of them?
yeah,
right.
probably about, I would say, 60+% of his time is on septic.
And that's what's charged to the
Yeah.
revolving account.
60% of his
Yeah.
and Richard's time, so you,
Richard does, he does them as well. He does a lot more administrative stuff to do with that sewer, the loan program and processing.
right, I'm just looking here, and it's permanent salary of 77,000.
Right, we have a percentage of your
Yeah,
salary.
percent of my salary,
Okay, so you're,
percentage of Richard's salary, percentage of Artel's salary are all paid from the
so
revolving.
that's not one dedicated individual.
It's on the revolver.
No, it's, an estimate of how many hours each person
Did you want?
dedicates to that.
If you look at the detail in the personnel spreadsheets towards the back, it states the hours that are being
Allocated, okay.
allocated to this.
Here, one question on the same vein. We just read in the paper that Mr. Ray is retiring, good for him, in May. And I guess, Libby, include you on this. Have discussions been going on about how to replace him or to look for
Yep, we're
savings?
just starting them now.
Okay. All right.
Nothing
Further-
concrete.
All right, great. Further questions? Okay. Sounds good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. Nice presentation. You will be coming back, Mr. Forrest, to join us about zoning and real estate. I have been informed the committee that there's some more analysis of the citizen warrant articles involving real estate that you're doing, and you'll come back with us on that before we make a recommendation.
Right, the planning board held its public hearing on the citizen zoning-related articles. I could certainly, when I come back, could update you on all that.
That'd be great.
All of them aren't closed, but we have, some of them have been closed, and we have a recommendation on those, but
Okay.
I certainly can do that one.
Okay, great. That'd be fine. Or actually, if you wanted, if it's in writing or to send it to the ones that are done now, it'd be
Sure.
great. Because maybe,
Yep, I can do that.
Okay. All right. I think that's it for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And moving along, the next item is review of citizen warrant articles for the 2015 annual town meeting. Nothing has changed. As far as I know, the only thing, I guess, going back to discussion, town administration budget discussion, is that there is an article that we've approved for shelving, and that in the motion was from free cash. Will that factor into your calculations for free cash? Because that might have been on a little thin ice doing that.
Well, if that's what you voted, I guess that's what's going to go in the warrant.
Okay, well, as simple as that, that's fine. Usually,
Well,
I won't say we like it.
But I think with your point, Matt, that not knowing what, I mean, we took the vote ahead of knowing what
yes, we did.
free cash was
Was.
and where it was going to be allocated.
That's correct.
And whether that should be relooked at.
And we certainly, if we can reserve the right to do that, and I agree with you on that, and go from there. But I guess just from the practicality purposes is that we have a motion.
Yeah.
And that's who we are.
And I think there is free cash available.
Okay.
Well, I should say, not available. There is free cash that is
Accounted for?
uncommitted entirely. Well, we tried to.
I know, I'm kidding. I couldn't resist. Sorry, I couldn't resist.
We need to get you a more detailed free cash breakdown of where we are right now, because
Right.
it didn't show everything today. So
Right.
we'll get that to you, and we can talk about that again.
Okay, the only reason why is, again, going back to, we have a motion and...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
As for any other citizen warrant articles, does anyone have any comments? Again, I have this on the agenda just so that if someone does want to talk about one, we can. John?
Yeah, it's funny that you brought, that David just mentioned what he did, because one of the things I was going to bring up is that we have approved, I am assuming that anything that we've approved, that we can go back at it again.
We can reconsider, to interrupt, anyone who voted positively, in this case for the motion for the shelves, can bring up a reconsideration for it, yes.
Okay, but only that person who,
Voted positively for it.
okay.
All right, so someone in the negative cannot do that. I believe I'm speaking correctly, looking over. About a reconsideration,
Yeah,
someone
I'm
who voted.
not really an expert on that.
I believe it
That's
is.
how it works.
I believe that's the case, because we've done that before. But, so anyway, is that there's always that opportunity to do that, revisit. And again, I asked the question about free cash is because I think it's almost like putting the cart before the horse kind of thing, and as what David explained better than I did. Okay. Okay, further questions on, oh, yes, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Are the Mill Hill articles going to go away, given the announcement from the hospital? Or?
You know,
On our side,
they
yes.
are, the board side, yes.
The board side,
This-
yes.
But there are citizen warrant articles from, I
There's
believe, Mr.
one,
Barata.
And
Right.
that'll have to stay on unless he gets all the rest of his citizens to agree to take it off before January 21st. Otherwise, it'll probably
Which
just
take
be
no
to
action, right. Yeah, that's why we're talking about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the way that stands. Yeah, for
Is
that.
there an appetite for taking a vote on that one right now?
Oh, sure, we can do that. So the motion, let me just pull it out. It is, yeah, no, that's fine, it's a good idea.
Yeah.
It is Article T, and the sponsor is Mr. Barata, and there's four different parts, I'll just go through it. First is transfer the portion of Mill Hill Park to the Board of Selectmen for the purpose of a long-term lease for medical purposes. Number two, authorizes the Board of Selectmen to enter into a long-term lease with the Nantucket Cottage Hospital. Item number three, authorize a home rule petition to release the Article 97 restriction. And number four, dedicate a portion of the water company land, which is signified by map 54, parcel 45, for park purposes. That's the mitigation part. And being that in a lot of earlier conversation, yes, I think we could go ahead and take a motion on this. So, would you like to?
I'll make a motion that we take no action on this particular article.
We have a motion to take no action. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Discussion on that? Okay. Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. That's another one down. Very good. And as for the others from this sponsor, when Mr. Vorse was here, some more analysis will be forthcoming.
Does the planning board, they haven't taken any of these up?
Well, that's what I'm going to ask him. He's going to, the zoning ones, the ones that are done, that's what I asked him. We'll get a thing in writing, and then we'll see. The one I believe that they were, and again, don't hold me on this unless you can jump in on this, there were some spot zoning issues that they frowned upon at the public
Yeah,
hearing.
I don't think they've had their hearing yet on zoning articles.
On the citizen warrant articles they did.
Oh, they did?
Yeah,
Planning board?
the citizen ones, yeah. And some of those spot zoning ones they frowned upon. That's what I'd heard.
Planning board?
Yeah, I think they did it on Monday, and he just
Wow.
said it.
I
So
didn't
that
think
would
they
be
got
like
there yet.
Like the funeral home.
funeral home
Right.
and stuff like that.
Right.
Oh, okay.
But that's why I want to get in writing before we do anything on that. Yeah, I believe some of those, they use spot zoning, which I guess
Okay.
is always a bad thing.
Well, yeah, they do kind of.
Yeah. Okay. That's why, but that's what I was asking Mr. Warr, if we can get it, so we can move on.
Yeah,
Because I think
get
it-
their motions in, yeah, we good. Get them out of the way.
Get them out of the way. So, yeah, I'm all for, and again, having this on the agenda, I will contact Mr. Barata and let him know on this too, but having this on the agenda so that we can whittle away, saves us time later on, so that's great. Any other articles to discuss?
Well, I've done that.
Okay. Hearing none. Oh, did you have a?
You know, I had a question, kind of going back to the free cash. How much is in the stabilization fund as we sit here?
3.7?
It's more like 4.5.
Oh, is that much?
I don't know off the top of my, I'll
So
have to.
if it's 4 and a
I
half,
can have it for you
the
on Monday
three
when we
that we're
come in.
looking at would be added to that, so it'd be upwards of 7 or so?
It
It's
would-
not going to be 3.
it won't be
but-
3.
But whatever it is
Yeah,
would
yeah.
be added, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Or to that other fund, the capital
Yeah,
budget.
yeah, I'd really rather, I'd like to see a separate fund.
We have a statutory limitation on how much we can get, right? Not how much the
That it can
fund
grow to?
balance.
I'll have to look, because I'm not readily aware of whether we have a limitation on that.
It was 5%.
I've never been in a community that's ever hit a cap, so
Yeah.
That might be annual.
it might be, I will have that for your next meeting.
Yeah, that's good to know, because I don't know if there is a cap. I'm sure, it sounds like there is, but I don't know. I never heard of it, because you're probably right.
I think there is, I just can't remember because the last.
That'd be good to know. I just remember, I guess from a historical perspective, it was, the stabilization fund was started, about 10 years ago, because it was deficient, and so tight controls were put on it to increase it, is that correct? No?
Yeah, yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah, but I guess going back to that, I mean, I think this committee would look favorably on the capital fund, just with, as John echoes, just have a little more updated, how shall I say, guidelines? Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Local guidelines?
Having a separate capital fund makes more sense to me anyway, because
And for the voters, too. Okay. All right, date of our next meeting is January 12th, 2015, and I believe we're reviewing the fire department budget, and also Chief McDougal will be talking about the new fire station, and we will be getting the budget tomorrow.
There is, but we're very far away from it. It's 10% of the assessed valuation of the town.
Well, that's it, really?
So we can go to about 1.8 billion.
Is that what, wow.
You can only
No wonder
put
you
10% of the
yeah.
levy limit,
Well, no doubt.
the prior year's levy in on an annual basis, and the cap,
10%.
there is a 10% cap, but it's on the assessed valuation of the town, so we're very far away from that.
Okay.
The story that I like, when I've been invited to talk to some of the groups, is if we were to, like many communities in Massachusetts, raise their taxes up to their levy ceiling, I think I've got my words correct, we could raise about $435 to $450 million per year to spend.
Yes.
That's a lot.
I mean,
That's a
so
lot,
that's
yeah.
sort of like the good news and the bad news.
Yeah.
At what cost?
At what cost? Well, you can do a lot of
I don't want to try to figure that out.
Very good.
That's right.
Okay.
And people are absolutely, I mean, when people know that we're either the, depending on how you do it, the third or fourth highest assessed community in the state, I mean, assessed values.
Right.
And then they understand exactly what that would translate into. You know, it's a good reminder to people that the town doesn't spend its money willy-nilly. I think it does pretty, in fact, maybe a
Responsible.
little parsimonious about it.
Now, just looking at, again, the fire department has also reviewed debt service on Monday, and also stabilization and trust fund review. So,
Which we'll send the information out tomorrow.
Great.
So
Everything
you can
will
review
come
it.
tomorrow for the meetings on Monday and Tuesday. Now on Thursday,
which,
you
next
have to
Thursday?
be announced topic. So I don't know what you want to do with that meeting.
On
TV,
Thursday?
yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, we can talk about it now. As I mentioned earlier, I think on Monday, is that, yeah, looking ahead on that, we're still scheduled, but if everything stands the way it is right now, we will cancel that meeting. So why don't we wait till Monday to be sure? Just trying to be flexible on that. Libby, is it premature to get a preliminary idea of the warrant that the board wants to submit for that capital stabilization fund that we can discuss on Monday? Is it premature?
No, I can give you a copy of it.
It might be good just to get the ball rolling on that.
I'm, may or may not be here Monday because the Board of Selectmen now has an executive session at 4:30.
Okay.
So, where are they meeting? Here. Okay. So I might start here, run upstairs, but it's going to take a while.
Okay.
So I probably won't be back after.
All right. That's fine.
But yeah,
All right, just because we'll be discussing it anyway.
okay.
And then another point is off the topic. If you look at your schedule, that all the Tuesday meetings will be at the middle school cafeteria, Cyrus Pierce Cafeteria, starting at 4:30, and that was by their request,
Yes.
not ours.
Yeah.
As Martin, we tried.
We tried, they said that they have teacher meetings every Tuesday, and the high school cafeteria wasn't available as well, so we checked everywhere.
And then I guess, okay, I think that's it from the schedule-wise. So unless something changes on Monday, yeah, we probably can cancel next Thursday. Or, I don't know if it's easier to move Public Works back to Thursday. I don't know if that's something you would want to consider for yourself, Libby. That's an idea, too.
I don't mind doing them Tuesday and having Thursday off.
That's fine. I'm the same way. We will be very flexible.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, John?
Yeah, I would actually, from a point of view of preparation, from our point of view.
Yes, sir.
I'd rather see that move to Thursday simply because it if we preparing for Monday and then preparing for Tuesday, it kind of, we're getting jammed all at the front of the week and then nothing at the end.
I understand. Well, why don't we?
Tuesday's fine, too, to have off.
Okay. How about this? I'll let that, since it's the department coming on in. Do you want to discuss that with Karen?
Yeah, why
Think
don't we
about it?
ask Kara, because I don't know if she's got anything on Thursday now.
Okay.
So can you ask her about it?
If you can. Okay, then that's fine, too. And then one other thing, it might help you or not, if since Kara's going to be here, do the enterprise, do sewer and solid waste at that time?
When they're not ready yet.
No, okay, so that's out. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to save.
Yeah.
Make my time. Okay. All right, very good.
Sorry.
So any other questions on the schedule? Any other questions overall? Oh, very good. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A second? Second. Okay, everybody have a nice weekend, and see you Monday downstairs, I believe. Right, Martin? Okay, write this down. I'll try to keep it getting it right.
So what I did was I made this,
What?
here.
What's allowed?
So this one will allow you to turn it, and then you can lock it in. Yeah, this is actually the mute button.
Thank you.
You can change the function of it to lock for